Welcome to Pensar Basketball Live, and today we are going to be talking about whether or not the Toronto Raptors have made a mistake in their coaching hire of Darko Rajakovic, as well as their dismissal of a head coach who they won a championship with, and Nick Nurse, whether or not the criticism being levied towards Darko Rajakovic right now is fair. Has he done good things? Has he done bad things? How much control does he have? I think this is a general conversation that needs to happen, and it's one that I've been waiting to have for a while. And I think that we can talk about a lot of historical precedent in terms of coaches who've succeeded, coaches who failed, coaches who succeeded under certain circumstances. And when those circumstances changed, they failed. And I think the general overall thing I want to talk about today is how much control do you and I realistically expect Darko Rajakovic or Nick Nurse or any head coach in the NBA to actually have? Make sure to hit like and subscribe. If you haven't subscribed, we do lives after every single game. We cover the Raptors. We hopefully take a pretty fair approach to it. Some people would disagree with that, but I think we try to be as fair as possible. And yesterday, I was very, very critical of Darko Rajakovic for bringing back Dennis Schroeder. And it felt like it's happened too many times. And I've gone back and forth on how much blame I want to levy towards this guy. So I started thinking about it, and I started thinking back on 20 plus years of trying to understand this game. And basketball is very layered and very nuanced. When it comes to the NBA, it's a completely different ballgame than when we're talking about Division II, Division I basketball. At the high school level, it's certainly very different than the experience that most of us have as players, which is high school basketball. Certainly very different than AAU. And at the end of the day, I think it almost always comes back to money, right? It's going to come back to money. The NBA as a league is about to undergo a massive influx of cash. Their next TV deal is going to be enormous. The costs of being bad, the cost of having your first overall pick bust, these costs are getting bigger and bigger. They used to be a big deal. It's now life or death. It's now you get fired. And so I guess I want to talk about really what went wrong with Nick Nurse, what went right, perhaps even go back a little bit further in Raptor history and talk about, coaches through Raptors history like Lenny Wilkins, guys like Kevin O'Neal. How much of it is tactics? How much of it is in-game adjustments? How much of it is development? How much of it is winning? How much of it is winning at all costs? And how much control does that coach really have? Well, I think first and foremost, all coaches are not equal. We must register this if we're going to have an intelligent discussion about this conversation, which is that you cannot compare a first-year head coach to Phil Jackson or Eric Spoelstra. You need to look at the organizational tent poles that exist and where that coach fits in. I think the best way to understand a head coach in the NBA, as well as perhaps even a head coach in most prime Division I programs, is a politician. They are politicians. That's a part of their job, but they're front-facing, right? Darko Rajakovic meets with the media every single day. Every single day. Off games, in between games, he's addressing, he's answering questions. He is the front-facing megaphone for the Raptors organization. Certainly it's not Pascal Siakam and Scottie Barnes. Those are players. Bobby Webster doesn't do daily interviews or even weekly interviews or even monthly interviews. A lot of people would like him to. I think they would perhaps get a lot more insight into how he feels. But then when guys like Masai Ujiri and Bobby Webster do these interviews, they don't usually offer very much because they're elected politicians too. Maybe what we would really love is to have an insight into what Ed Rogers and Larry Tannenbaum think about the Toronto Raptors. But we don't get that. Those guys have their views private. Their views are private because this is a business. If you've attended any Raptor games this year, you will understand that the business is failing. Yes, those tickets are very expensive, but look at the resale prices. You have a $400 ticket that is often going and being scalped for $130, and it's sitting there and sitting there. People do not like this product right now. People do not like this team right now. All the goodwill that they built up during the championship run, all the flood and influx of sponsors and money that came in, all the bonuses, all the stock bonuses, all the renegotiations of contracts. So you better believe Nick Nurse renegotiated his contract the second he won that championship. He felt he deserved it. You better believe Masai Ujiri got paid to deliver a championship to Toronto. He deserved it. Oh, you better believe that a lot of these guys got years of job security. But what is the goal of an NBA coach? What have they hired Darko Rajakovic to do? What did they hire Nick Nurse to do? Nick Nurse was not hired to win a championship, by the way, just an FYI. Before Kawhi Leonard was traded for, that was curtains for that core. Dwayne Casey had almost assuredly lost the room, so to speak, after years and years of playoff battles. The pound the rock, pick yourself up by the bootstraps speech had gotten stale. They needed a new voice. They went with Nick Nurse. And the full plan was probably to trade DeMar DeRozan for young pieces. A young piece like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was certainly on the table. They explored that. Draft picks, compensation, tear it down, do it the right way. This core has hit its limit. There are no more chances. And then LeBron James goes west, and Kawhi becomes available, and suddenly there's a chance. But you already hired Nick Nurse. And they went with it. How many coaches could have delivered a championship with that team as constructed? Marc Gasol, Kawhi Leonard, Danny Green, Kyle Lowry, Serge Ibaka. How many people? Pascal Siakam, Fred VanVleet, OG Anunoby. Oh my God, an abundance of riches. For a team that currently today does not have one bench player who holds a candle to even Norman Powell, who was often struggling to get minutes on that team. Think about how far you have fallen. You went from having a top 5 point guard in the NBA to having the worst starting point guard in the NBA. The metric has changed. The metric has changed a lot. But what did they hire him to do? What did they hire this new guy to do? And what is he expected to do? I think they hired him to change the culture. I think they hired him to teach the game of basketball to a lot of players that had felt sort of abandoned by the previous coach. And depending on how you're choosing to view this, the fall off from Dennis Schroeder to Fred VanVleet to Dennis Schroeder is enormous. It's enormous. Fred VanVleet is still a top 10, top 12 point guard in the NBA. He may not be the top 50 player generously that he accounted himself to be last year, but he's close. Dennis Schroeder is not a top 100 player in the NBA, much less a 150 player in the NBA. I'm just being real. The fall off is enormous. Darko Rajakovic got this job before Fred VanVleet made his decision. The expectation, had he had Fred VanVleet, maybe, would be a little bit different. I think he was brought in to coach the young players, to develop the young players. Now, we have all been very impressed with Scottie Barnes, and I personally credit a lot of his development to him. But how can we ignore that the coach that talked about him all offseason as the next Nikola Jokic, this development coach who's had such a great track record of boosting the careers of Desmond Bane and Devin Booker and Jaren Jackson Jr. to the point where those players still sing his praises. Mikal Bridges, everywhere he's gone, he's had a track record with players. Even our aforementioned villain in this story, Dennis Schroeder, has spoke glowingly about the job that Darko Rajakovic did for his development in OKC. Certainly, Dennis Schroeder was a very much worse player before he showed up to OKC. Became more of a point guard, point setter, quarterback. Not a good one, not a great one, not a starting one, but a better one than he was the Chuck Happy guard that he was in Atlanta, losing away. He learned how to be a winner. And maybe all of that culminated for Germany this past summer. I think that it is impossible to talk about Scottie Barnes' ascent as a shooter, as a consistent player, without talking about the job that the Raptors coaching staff has done for him as well. As much as I want to credit Scottie and I want to credit Brian, because those are the people that I want to credit, I can't ignore that Darko Rajakovic has absolutely had it in his mind to empower this young player and to set him up to succeed. Okay, bench unit's not doing so well. Consider where the unit started. He played Grady, 18 minutes, 17 minutes, 20 minutes. He tried playing Jalen McDaniels. He wanted a deep rotation. Increasingly, as we've gone on and those players have continued to struggle, players he did not choose, he did not draft them, he did not put them in place. Masai Ujiri and Bobby Webster did that. Dan Tolzman did that. Teresa did that. Those people did that. He did not hire these people. Larry Tannenbaum and Rogers and Bell, they did that. He did not give them bonuses. But he's an easy target. He's an easy scapegoat because he's so positive. I want to flip the script a little bit and just talk about what I think he's done well. I think he's managed to connect with Malachi Flynn. The Malachi Flynn that I've seen this year has been a much better player, even if the numbers are not completely overwhelmingly positive and he's pretty much maxing out anything that he could possibly be. What he's become is a fringy role player that ideally should be like the 12th guy on your bench. Where did we start out with Malachi Flynn just 25 games ago? I was questioning whether the guy was an NBA player. What about Precious Achiuwa? Oh, some very frustrating moments with Precious Achiuwa this year where I have honestly wondered very aloud if this guy might be the dumbest player in the NBA. But Darko Rajakovic was not with him at Montverde. He was not with him at Memphis. That's on Penny Hardaway for not teaching the man the game. That's on him for not learning the game better. Eric Spoelstra coached Precious Achiuwa. Okay. Nick Nurse coached Precious Achiuwa. This is a third guy to coach Precious Achiuwa as a pro. Penny Hardaway, who's widely regarded as one of the better college coaches, I disagree, coach Precious Achiuwa. Montverde, which is considered almost it's a high school program, but is considered almost on level in terms of their coaching and facilities with a Division I school. They coach Precious Achiuwa. And none of those people could teach this guy how to set a proper ball screen. At some point, if your players aren't dogs, they're not dogs. But he's connected with him. Somehow, he's connecting with all his players, even the players who are not playing very well, even the players who are not playing very much. Guys who've had their roles diminished continue to sing his praises. Scottie Barnes, when asked yesterday, said the vibes are still positive, that they are still positive. Now, this might be very frustrating for some of us out there who are saying, how the hell can the vibes still be positive? You're losing. You're losing so much. Was Darko Rajakovic brought here to win? Did the calculus change when Fred VanVleet decided to sign with Houston, an unforeseen, somewhat unpredictable event that resulted in Dennis Schroeder suddenly being your starter? Is there a valid claim that Scottie Barnes might struggle as a full-time starting point guard if teams really, really, really started scouting it? Does he have a point? I think he has a point. I would like to see it anyway, and we can agree and disagree on that, but he has a point. From a skill work perspective, I talked to a lot of trainers. Y'all know that. You look at elite creating guards like Devin Booker, James Harden. Let me digress for a second. From a skill perspective, when you initiate a drive, you want to be lower than the defender. You want to have your shoulder almost to where their waist is. Look at how high Scottie is. all the time. The crazy part about him being so good right now is how much better he could be once he figures this out. Scottie Barnes plays high. He plays high a lot. He plays high with the basketball. He plays high with his body. He's upright a lot. You look at even a guy like Ben Simmons, who's a little bit taller than Scottie. He plays low. Kevin Durant, he plays low. Every elite star has figured out that the higher you play, the more turnover prone you become. And we've seen it. We've seen it this year. So as much as we are huge Scottie Barnes fans, we must also be realistic and understand that a player with his limitations currently, factoring in as a top 20 player is a miracle. It's a miracle that has been created by his elite vision and his talent and his commitment to winning and his grit and toughness, and ultimately his commitment to this team, which is starting with his relationship with his coach. When I compare Scottie Barnes' numbers last December to this December, it is a seismic gap. If you follow us on Twitter, you saw the breakdown. 15 points, 7 rebounds, 3.9 assists last year. He's at 6.3 assists, 9 point something rebounds, and 24 points per game. He's gone from shooting 21% from three to 38% from three. And trust me, that's not all Brian and Scottie. That's a lot of Darko Rajakovic and Jama Malalela and this coaching staff empowering him. Last year, we wanted Scottie to be a featured guy. This year, we're complaining when he's asked to man a bench unit with 4 bench players. How much of that is on him too? When he was being passive earlier with those units, they weren't working. Darko kept going to it. He kept running Scottie with the bench, and we kept screaming, put some talent around him. Was he forcing him to become uncomfortable? Was he forcing him to be in a position that he didn't want to be in with players he can't defer to? Oh, don't leave it to Scottie to go and to try to defer to Jalen McDaniels and Gary Trent and Malachi Flynn. And he's not doing that anymore. December has been different for Scottie. It's his best month of the season so far. He's really thriving. What if this keeps going? What if this keeps building? And what if in April we're talking about a guy averaging 30 points per game? Will Darko Rajakovic have succeeded at that point? Or will we continue to say he's failing and Scottie is succeeding in spite of him? Worth noting. The win-loss record is not great. The Raptors have pissed away a lot of leads. The Raptors have continued to play starting lineup that's not effective. So my question is, does he have the power to change the starting lineup? Yesterday, I was pretty firm that, if he really wanted to change the starting lineup, he probably could. He could probably go to Masai and say, hey, I don't want to start Dennis. I want to start starting Scottie at point, and I want to move Dennis to the bench. But Dennis Schroeder, among other things, is one of the few players on your team who is under contract next year. And despite my insistence that he has been absolutely horrible and a train wreck for this team, I must also agree that he has been one of your top 7 players. It's not that egregious that one of your top 7 players starts. I'm not negating everything I'm saying. I still think he should go to the bench. I'm just saying he's not starting Jalen McDaniels. He's starting his second best option at that position. Does he feel that adding Gary Trent Jr. to the starting lineup and adding all that spacing, could it potentially add one guy who takes a lot of shots to the starting lineup? Gary Trent Jr. takes more shots per 100 possessions than Dennis Schroeder. So, because he's so effective and he's so capable of going off for 30, 35 points, could we see a lot more of those Scottie 8, 10, 12-point games that we were seeing last year? Is he forcing him to sink or swim? Is he basically saying, I'm going to continue to play you with lineups that don't make sense and force you to grow in a way that you don't want to grow? Am I assuming positive intent? Right? It's worth questioning. Why is he here? He's here to teach the game of basketball, but he is also here to help the guy who hired him keep his job. We don't know what rubric Masai Ujiri is being measured on, but I can venture a guess that it's not winning a championship this year. I think about how Nick Nurse got fired. I think about when he got fired, when he sort of fired himself. I think about Fred VanVleet's comments a lot. I've broken down a lot of them on this channel, and some of you may know that. You followed it. I thought about a lot about what Masai Ujiri said about there will be no selfishness on this team and all the sort of things. And I thought to myself, this team has had a stagnant offense for 4 years. What suddenly clicked last year? What changed? I think what changed is Scottie took a step back, and Scottie wasn't happy. And if Scottie Barnes is not happy, and Scottie's taking a step back, and he's your best asset, and your other young assets are not developing, then you change the coach. Coaches become casualties in the NBA just as well as they do in the NCAA. Maybe guys like Mike Krzyzewski and, bigger college coaches maybe have had job security that is not enjoyed by most NBA guys. But think about how important a coach is. Monty Williams was considered a hell of a coach before he got to Detroit. He is in the midst of a 24-game losing streak, which may extend to 27. Nobody saw that roster and looked at it and said, that's going to be the worst team of all time. It doesn't hold a candle to the process era Sixers. It's not even close. There's like 7 or 8 real NBA players on that team, and they can't win. Why? Is it because Monty's a terrible coach? When did he become a terrible coach? Look at Greg Popovich. The San Antonio Spurs have Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson. Granted, they're not playing very much. Jeremy Sohan, Trey. Like, they have a lot of players. They have Victor Wembanyama. They lost like 16 or 17 straight games too, didn't they? Jordan Poole is an NBA champion. Kyle Kuzma, I believe, is an NBA champion, wasn't he? Didn't he win a championship with the Lakers in the bubble? Or am I mistaken on that? These aren't teams that should be losing 16 or 17 straight games, but they are losing 16 or 17 straight games because the open secret, and maybe something people don't like to talk about, is that coaches don't run NBA teams. Players run NBA teams. I've seen a lot of people apologize to Nick Nurse on Twitter. It's kind of weird and it's a little bit strange. Nick Nurse is not the basketball god that you think he is. He is a very good tactician, a very creative mind, and certainly an above average coach. But his time came to an end, and there's absolutely no need to apologize. He absolutely put his own ego and himself above the team. But partly, I think, it's because he saw the writing on the wall, and it's the same writing on the wall that Fred VanVleet has been alluding to in every offseason interview, which is these two guys just didn't mesh with the ascending star. And that happens in the NBA. That's true. If LeBron doesn't like you, you're getting traded. If you're Cleveland Cavaliers coach and LeBron don't like you, you're going. You're gone. And Tyronn Lue is coming in. Darko Rajakovic was brought here because his philosophy on basketball, which is movement-oriented and absolutely evolved and correct, in my opinion, agrees with how Scottie wants to play. And the Raptors, for the most part, have tried their best to do that. They're not losing games right now because of offense. Certainly, no one expected this team to be a top 10 offensive team, but they expected them to tread water based on their defensive potential. So my question to you is Darko Rajakovic, has he changed something schematically? Have he or the coaching staff changed something schematically that would account for one of the top 5 to 7 defenses in terms of player personnel and ability and skill and athletic potential, lateral quickness, speed, all the stuff that the Raptors have going for them? Has he changed something schematically that would force a team with this abundance of potential defensively to fall off a cliff the way that they have. You think he's asking Dennis Schroeder to not put a hand up. He's asking Pascal Siakam to go under a screen and not recover. He's asking guys to leave open corner shooters, send these sorry-ass double teams, lose their man in transition, not get back on defense. You think he's asking guys to do this. That's why he's calling 2-3 timeouts in every single first quarter. That's why he's burning through these timeouts. He is powerless here. He can make a change to the starting lineup, absolutely. Will it have a ripple effect that we all intend? I think most of us would just get a cathartic release to say, yes, see, look, we're trying something, and Dennis got benched. Because right now, Dennis Schroeder and Darko Rajakovic are punching bags for our frustrations with the product that we're seeing on the court. We opine and we think to ourselves that if these two guys just would do something different or be different, or if they weren't here, that suddenly things would be great. But I think we need to look at ourselves in the mirror, to borrow a term from Dennis Schroeder, and ask ourselves, have we not had the same issue with this team last year with Nurse and Fred? Yeah, it's the same issue. A point guard who was shooting abysmally from the field, whose role was never corrected because of perceived seniority and priority within the offense. And we were frustrated because guys like OG and Pascal were standing in corners being frozen out of the offense when they had a better chance. I think there's genuine frustration when things don't go the way we want them to, and we often look for a scapegoat. Last year, it was Scottie. If Scottie could just take the step. Then we build narratives. He didn't work hard enough. He doesn't want it enough. He's dogging it. Having watched Scottie Barnes for so many years, the idea of Scottie Barnes not working hard, Scottie Barnes being a character issue, the Thaddeus Young issue, oh, he's immature, he's this, he's that. These things really grinded my teeth. Like, they made me really angry last year because I knew they weren't true. And I could see the work that he was putting in after the games, and I knew that this work ethic thing wasn't true. But it was ultimately just Raptor fans looking around at their team and saying, what's wrong? It's been interesting to observe from a distance, watching the Detroit Pistons go through what they're going through right now, and to see how quickly the Detroit fans have turned on Monty Williams. They really should be turning on Troy Weaver, but regardless, they've used their frustrations for Killian Hayes. Killian Hayes is not necessarily the issue right now. Troy Weaver is not the only issue. Certainly their ownership is not the only issue. It's a compendium of problems that compound. It is, ultimately an ownership and franchise decision and general manager decision to hold Cade to this level of 31% usage. It's a fan base that tolerates it because the narrative of Cade doesn't have help, Cade doesn't have shooters is easier to swallow than we didn't probably select the guy first overall who we should have, which is Scottie Barnes or Evan Mobley or even Franz Wagner. That's not something that people want to accept about their team because it doesn't make them feel very good. So it's easier to say Monty is washed. Monty is overrated. Yeah, the guy who won 64 games and made it to the finals with Devin Booker and Chris Paul and DeAndre DeAndre Ayton. That guy's washed. That guy's terrible. He forgot how to coach. Greg Popovich, guy who has 5 championships, he forgot how to coach because he's starting Jeremy Sohan at the point guard. He forgot. So we channel our frustrations in a direction that makes us feel like the world makes sense. Because when a team that we expect to be 500 falls 8 games, 10 games under 500, someone has to be wrong. And almost always, I find that we blame the wrong person. So enough riffing. Who do I actually hold responsible for what's happening with the Raptors? I don't think it's so simple as one player. I think this team would be in a much better position if Gary Trent Jr. and Jalen McDaniels and Grady Dick were continuing to shoot well. And given their percentages last year at college, Philadelphia, and for the Raptors, certainly there was a reasonable expectation that those guys would be able to provide some spacing and some competent minutes. They haven't been. That's an issue. I don't think anyone should be expecting Dennis Schroeder to be much better than he's been or any different than he's been. I think it's egregious that he had 40% usage in yesterday's fourth quarter, given that he was cold coming into the game and then dominated the game and proceeded to lose the game. But he didn't lose it alone. He didn't lose the lead alone. He didn't start out the game horribly. And certainly Jakob Poeltl is an above average NBA player. He is, I said Dennis Schroeder may not be a top 150 player. Jakob certainly is one of the top 150 players in the NBA. But who traded for him? Who decides to trade for a center who can't shoot and traded multiple picks to get him? The questions must be asked. Who are we protecting when we blame somebody else? Right? Last year, the fan sentiment over Nick Nurse changed drastically because of how he handled certain situations, his lack of adjustments, and the fact that it felt like the team had genuinely quit on him. It doesn't feel like the team has really quit on Darko Rajakovic, but it feels certain players have not bought in to his defensive and offensive philosophy this year. We started out one way in preseason. Defensively and offensively, this team looked great. I know they often caution you to not pay too much attention to preseason, but the way they were playing was the way they were playing. Okay. Moving the basketball quickly, running in transition, getting back on defense, these things don't just go away from preseason to regular season. Their efficacy does. But when the regular season started, suddenly I started to notice a shift in how players were boxing out, in how hard they were willing to go when they were coming under a screen or trying to fight over a screen, and how likely they were to rotate over and close the gap when their teammate got beat, and how likely they were to recover for a block at the rim when they were just standing right there and they could easily at least try to attempt and they just watched another player score. The Raptors have not played with effort. Now, you can argue that that is on the coach, that the coach should just bench the guys who's not playing with effort. But I got to tell you, one of the guys who's not playing with effort makes a hell of a lot of money. And he hasn't really been very good defensively all year. And you can't bench him. Tried to bench him a few times, just creatively, tried to find ways to bench him. But you can't just bench him outright because then it's a scandal. And this media space is going to make a really big deal out of it. And they're going to say, well, and this media space did make a big deal out of it. The first 7 games, that dude's usage went low. This media space couldn't stand it. The Raptors were 3-4, by the way. They had a really tough schedule to start. They were 3-4. They eventually ended up close to 500 after the 20-game mark. And his usage went up and up and up. They couldn't stand it. They said that it was a conspiracy. They weren't happy. So now we have a more Pascal-led offense where he gets to kind of do his own thing because he wouldn't do the other thing and he was struggling with the shooting. And now we've sort of reverted back to this mismatch hunting. One guy does his own thing. Yeah, the assists are up, sure, because Scottie's a more featured part of the offense, certainly. You're passing the ball more, you're playing with a little bit more pace, but really, the half-court offense is a little bit better for it. Yeah, transition offense and defense have fallen off a cliff. But I wonder if Darko Rajakovic could have this team play the way he wants them to play, if you can get guys who actually bought in, that you can get a trade for Kevin Huerter or Harrison Barnes, low ego guys who just kind of come in and say, what do you need from me, coach? How would they do? And whose responsibility is it to get those guys here? Whose responsibility is it to get guys in the room who are actually going to take the coaching? There's certainly guys who have taken this coaching, who have taken this coach and taken what he has to say seriously. I think so much of being an NBA coach is dealing with people, not only dealing with the fans and dealing with the media on a night-to-night basis, not losing your cool, not being snippy, not revealing too much, not calling out guys, but also dealing with these guys in the room. I've never met a player in my life who didn't want the truth. Honestly, even the egotistical ones secretly want the truth. They just want you to be straight with them. Everyone's gassing them up. Their agents gassing them up. Their friends are gassing them up. Their girls gassing them up. They just want the truth. I think he's told them the truth. I think he's told them the truth. I think he's told them what they need to do to play. I think he's told them when they're not going to play, when they're going to be out of the rotation or in the rotation. I think he's communicated with them that he cares about them and that he wants their long-term growth. And I think that's why a lot of these players are still rocking with this dude, right? I think this live was more of a cathartic experience or a cathartic attempt to try and curb the notion that it's always just one guy's fault, because we've gotten into a sort of habit of it being one guy's fault. And the truth is, whether it be the players or whether it be the coaches, these are all employees. When you go to Walmart, do you get mad at the cashier because the price of Bounty went up? No. You shouldn't. Some people do, but you shouldn't be one of those people. And when the store manager comes out, do you get mad at the store manager because, they won't validate your parking? Or is that a more head office thing? And do you call the head office and then get mad at the first person who calls in, the first person you talk to? I had an issue with TD Bank yesterday where I had a fraudulent charge go off on my card, and it was a hell of a thing to deal with last night. And when I called the guy, he was super nice, but he's not TD Bank. He's not TD Bank. He's just a guy who works in Oshawa for a TD branch. I have to call this guy and deal with him. I am a customer. He is an employee. Ultimately, we are dealing with a fraudulent organization neither one of us know, that has extracted funds from an account which is run by a billionaire ownership group that God knows where it extends to and who the CEO is. It's really not him or me. We are just ants. I'm not saying that Darko Rajakovic is blameless. I am saying, however, that Rank Scrub with the super chat, thank you so much. Is it wrong to want multiple cheap point guard playing more? I don't really understand the question. I'm so sorry. Sorry, I don't understand the question. Is it wrong to want the... What I'm trying to say is that he's done a lot of good. Nice when saying Masai fired Nurse because Malachi didn't get enough minutes. Let that sink. I don't think that's the case. I think that Masai Ujiri fired Nick Nurse because he lost the locker room and he lost perspective and he lost his star because he didn't know who his star was. See, the truth is that to be successful as a coach, at least from what I've gathered in 20 years of researching this extensively on any level, you need to first identify who's your boss. Who is your boss and what are they being evaluated on? Are they being evaluated on growth? Are they being evaluated on wins? Are they being evaluated on money, like the amount of money they're bringing in? Masai Ujiri deserves a lot of credit for how much MLSE has been able to boost the value of this franchise over the last 10 years. You don't just get to wipe it away because he made one bad move for Jakob Poeltl and let Fred VanVleet walk away. Those are not... He's not blameless either. But you don't just get to wash it all away because he's made some very rich people insanely richer. Okay? He's been a part of that. And right now, the only question that Darko Rajakovic needs to ask himself is, what is my place in all of this? What is my role? What is my job? I'll tell you right now, if Masai Ujiri, Bobby Webster, and Darko Rajakovic have a meeting today and they determine that Dennis Schroeder is detrimental to the team and that starting him is detrimental to the team, they will absolutely 1000% bench him. No questions asked. I don't know why this team doesn't do the obvious thing that most of us want them to do, which is start Gary Trent Jr. But it might have something to do with the fact that Gary has never been considered a part of the core. Think about it. Really think about it. Masai Ujiri, when he talks about the core, he's mentioned Precious. He's mentioned even Malachi. He's mentioned Scottie, of course, OG, Pascal, Fred in the past. He's spoken glowingly about Jakob Pertl. As much as Dennis Schroeder wants to create the narrative that he is here for the coaches and he has this great relationship with the coaches, all of that may be true. What is being ignored in all of this is the fact that Dennis Schroeder has a good relationship with Masai Ujiri as well, and that he has wanted him on his team for a while. They have explored this conversation before. They like him, probably a little bit more than they like Gary Trent right now, which could explain why he's starting. Maybe this was the plan they laid out. You know, Masai Ujiri and Bobby Webster are not the types of general managers that come from, outside the playing experience. They both played basketball, not at the NBA level, but they both played. And Masai Ujiri's been a scout. He has deep, deep ideas about basketball and the way the team ought to play. If he sees Dennis Schroeder as a starting point guard and eventually sees Scottie as a predator wing, and they don't want to start Scottie at point, it's not going to happen. If they see Dennis starting at point, as a necessity because they feel that Scottie will struggle if scouted against as a point guard, or that he'll struggle to find shots in a lineup that features Pascal plus Gary. Think about it. Does Scottie defer to Gary more than he defers to Dennis? Yes, he does. So maybe that's the theory. There's so much at play. But what's important to realize is that Darko Rajakovic is not going to get fired because the Raptors lose some games. If he will get fired, it will be for one reason and one reason only. If he loses Scottie. If he loses Scottie's patience, if he loses Scottie's trust, if he does something to warrant that loss of trust, he will be gone very fast. He does not make a lot of money. He does not have a ton of clout. If the young players regress or continue to regress the way they have, you can't just keep passing the buck down. Those young players will be moved before Darko Rajakovic is moved. I believe when they hired him to teach this team how to play basketball. It felt last year that they didn't know how to, or that they didn't know how to play a brand of basketball that Masai Ujiri thought this team should be playing. And certainly not a brand of basketball that Scottie Barnes wanted to play. Right now, really, the pieces are a little bit jumbled. They're not quite where they're supposed to be. This team will be in a different place if Grady pops for you next year. Certainly, the type of player that he is and could be certainly is a lot more valuable than some of the players who are playing right now. Maybe a trade needs to be made, and hopefully will be made. I don't think that Darko Rajakovic is a stupid coach. I don't think that he's coaching this defense to be this bad or even coaching this offense to be this stagnant. His position on basketball is unquestionable. The way he wants to play is unquestionable. He's talked about it at length, ad nauseum. And when I look around at the best teams in the league, they're all doing what he's preaching. But this team is not. I say this to say that I would like to see a change. I would like to see a change in the starting lineup. I would like to see a change in his rotations. But that change will not happen if it is imposed from the top. That change cannot happen. Because as much as our old high school thinking of that dude's not playing defense, bench him, holds true in high school and may hold true in AAU, truth is, as basketball has become more and more money dominated, this shit isn't even holding true in college. It takes a player and a coach. When a player and a coach have a disagreement, the coach gets fired. If the player is good, the coach gets fired. If the player is a scrub, the player gets waived. Right now, Darko Rajakovic does not hold more weight in this organization than most of his players. And he knows that. He's a front-facing guy. He's going to come out and he's going to tell you, we didn't do this, we didn't do that. I keep preaching this, I keep preaching that. I want us to play like this, I want to play like that. But dude, at the end of the day, if Pascal Siakam will not box out, you can't do anything about it. There's nothing. It's a trade-off. Why do you think Nick Nurse was motivating some of these dudes with money? If you do this, you'll be an all-star. If you do this, you'll be all-NBA. If you do this, you'll average 22 points per game. Because it motivates the self-interest. I pray for Darko that he will get more players like Scottie and more players like Jakob, ideally ones who can shoot, and more players like Otto. Players who just simply do it for the love of the game and say, you know what, whatever you need from me, coach. At some point in his life, Scottie Barnes will make over $100 million in a year. I'm convinced with the next CBA, it's coming. At some point in his life, if Grady Dick figures it out and figures out his NBA career and bounces back on track, he'll make $60 million in a year. The money that comes into this is insane. The bonuses for guys like Masai Ujiri to be able to sign their check, he's not worried about his job security either. The minute he gets fired, if he ever gets fired, if Ed Rodgers decides to get his way, he will be hired within 3 months by somebody out there, and they will pay him $20 million a year to come in and be their general manager, be their executive. I am convinced that that day will come where he is no longer, on this team. I'm sure it will come. But one thing I'm sure of is that in my lifetime, coaches have become more and more irrelevant, and players are really the ones who are calling the shots. Darvin Ham is the coach of the Los Angeles Lakers. He cannot get Anthony Davis to box out. He cannot get Anthony Davis to commit to the defensive end on the second half. If he doesn't want to play, he doesn't want to play. I think Willie Green is a fantastic coach for Dyson Daniels and Herb Jones and Jonas Valanciunas and Jose Alvarado. But do you think that Willie Green can bench Zion for his lazy ass not even recovering on defense, trotting back and forth, setting these sorry ass screens? You think he can just bench him? He can't. We are in a world in which money runs shit. And if you want to know who's calling the shots, look at their paycheck. Okay? Because there's no way in hell that Darko Rajakovic can bench Pascal Siakam for not playing defense. He just can't. Nor should he want to. He's a very important player for your offense, and you'd be an idiot to bench him. But to make a point, to say, hey, if you don't do this, you're not going to play. Those are the coaches who always get fired. You need to find a way. Hey, airplane. You want the vegetables? It's coming on the airplane. You can't shove it. You can't threaten. You have no power. Greg Popovich, Eric Spoelstra, they have power. Two of the most powerful coaches in the league. Mike Malone will get there. He is getting there. Because of his relationship with Nikola Jokic, he is there right now. Where if he wants to bench Aaron Gordon, and you will notice that when organizations figure out this dynamic, when they get that dynamic, everything starts to click because players will fall into line. If they know that if they don't agree, they're going to get benched, they'll fall in line. But right now you have inmates running the asylum. And this is not an anti-player podcast. I understand. I'm very pro-player. But when players refuse to play defense and players are above benching, when players dominate possessions and take stupid shots and there's no consequences, then at some point you have to ask yourself, if we're not doing this for championships, then what are we doing it for? It's easy to sell a guy, sell guys on the championships. You'll be immortalized in the city. You'll make more money on your next contract. You'll be an NBA champion. Yeah, it's easy to motivate guys like Rasheed Wallace when they're 35 with the dangling carrot of an NBA championship. Do you think you could have motivated Rasheed Wallace at 25 with the appeal of a championship? You think you can motivate Draymond Green right now? Consider the economics of the NBA right now. Steve Kerr is sick and tired of Draymond Green. Steve Kerr is one of the most secure coaches in the league. He has job security for a very, very long time because of winning so many championships with them. Granted, Mike Dunleavy did not hire him, but he is an esteemed coach and he still has the respect of his starting point guard, who happens to be one of the greatest players of all time. Just like Kobe and Phil, Michael and Phil, Steve and Steph. It's like that. But you think that Draymond Green is worried about getting fined? Charles Barkley makes over $20 million a year to be on inside the NBA, right? It's close to $20 million. That's the economics of the NBA. They sign these dudes up because they're a huge part of how they sell and market this product. You'll notice these guys are on NBA 2K, right? If Draymond Green retired from basketball tomorrow, he would have a spot on that show. He would. He is extremely, extremely well-spoken, interesting. He has the appeal of championships. He is a marketable name. Everyone knows who he is. He has the accolades, so he's not a scrub. He was an all-NBA type of performer, all-NBA defense, defensive player of the year. He's a guy who's stamped. And when he decides to retire from basketball, you better believe that those podcast deals that he's got right now are going to be nothing. Because at some point, Draymond Green is going to get paid $30 million to talk about the basketball. This dude is set for life. Clan Holmes saying, plus he could make it on W. Not sure on Draymond and TV, bro. Well, he's already been on TV and he already has a podcast and he's incredibly good at it. Podcast P, Paul George, he's setting himself up for this too. Every one of these dudes saw Charles Barkley's contract and said, why not me? Why not me? I get to work 2 hours a day and I get to come and talk about basketball in studio and make $20 million, $15 million if I'm really good at it, if I get really good at this. This is a life after basketball. They always talk about how athletes have such a short shelf life, even for guys who make 60, 70, 80 million dollars in their career. It goes away fast because they spend so much. Maintaining their lifestyle after their playing days is a huge deal. Anyways, my point is money talks. At the end of the day, guaranteed contracts. Players have guaranteed contracts. They cannot be just cut and waived. They know that. Pascal Siakam's not going to do anything to get benched. He knows that. He could shoot. Let me ask you a question straight up, and let me know in the chat what you think. Let's say Pascal Siakam came out and shot 25% from the field and 5% from three and didn't play defense. How long before Pascal Siakam got benched? He would never get benched. He can't get benched. What if Scottie had come out and done that? What if Scottie just didn't play defense and Scottie was just sorry on defense? Not to the point where it's like he's not running back, but like he's just bad defensively, bad offensively, doesn't make any progress as a shooter. But he's a former rookie of the year, 4th overall pick, big marketable asset. You held him out of trades. He has so much value intrinsically to your organization. At what point do you believe that Scottie Barnes would be benched? He would never get benched. OG Scottie and Pascal are above being benched, which means that you're basically leaving it up to them. This is a players' league. Don't get it twisted. Chuck saying, don't you think they have checked out because they're getting traded? Gary, no. OG and Pascal, yeah. Certainly possible. How do you motivate Pascal Siakam at this point? He's going to get a max contract pretty much from somebody desperate out there. He just watched Fred VanVleet have the season from hell last year, for half the season at least, and still get maxed out. He's a much better player. What is the financial incentive? If not all NBA and super max, what is the incentive for Pascal Siakam? A guy who I have honestly very openly questioned whether he loves the game of basketball many times in my life. What's the incentive? There is no incentive. That's the point. There is no incentive. Just maintain, do the bare minimum. I'm not playing to win here, man. Just playing to get paid. And that's the facade that these coaches are paid to keep up. It's bullshit. This is sports entertainment. I was like 8 years old, and I attended a WWF um, live, and I got to see Bret Hart for the first time live. Okay, I was a huge Bret Hart fan, and he gave me his glasses, which was super cool. Okay, imagine 8-year-old me, and I remember watching and thinking when I was 8 years old, is this fake? These guys don't look that tall. They're not as tall. Their heights were all lies. The whole thing was a lie. Client Holmes, know him personally, as in Bret Hart personally. Dude, if you could get him to come on the live, there's no amount of thanks that I would ever give you. Like I would love to talk to Bret. That'd be awesome. Canadian hero, but like just someone that intrinsically over the years, I just feel like I've understood Bret Hart. Like if ever, I mean, it would be my dying wish. Like absolutely make it happen, man. If you know him and you have a good relationship with him, I would be so obliged. Anyways, my point being, now I'm just remembering my fanning days over Bret Hart and Stu Hart and Owen Hart, rest in peace. What I'm trying to say is that we have a false consciousness as sports fans, and we have a mythology and a mythologizing, if that's a word, where we look at this thing that we're watching and we're invested in it being real. We're invested in the idea that all of these guys that we're cheering are trying to win, and they're doing their best to win. And, everyone comes out in the post-game scrums and they say all the right stuff, and they say, we just didn't have it tonight. We did whatever. It's not real. It's not true. I have no doubt that certain players go out every single night and they bust their ass and they try to win. I have no doubt that half the league is like that. But there's another half of the league that's just mixed with two types of guys who are just obsessed with the life. They're not trying to win games. They don't give a shit. This is not their life. This is not their passion. They just happen to be good at it, good enough to make a living. And that's all it is. One thing I cannot doubt at this point is that Darko is in this for the right reasons. There's a lot of coaches in the league that I feel they're in it for the wrong reasons. They're in it to be the man. They're in it to power trip. Maybe they're nerds who, they kind of want to get their revenge on jocks. Maybe people, they didn't make the basketball team or something like that. And so they just want to be in power of men that they perceive to be very powerful and very influential. Those guys never last. They never last. I believe that Darko Rajakovic is a gifted person in his ability to communicate and his ability to connect with players. I think his ability to see people's flaws and to call them out, maybe these things need to be worked on for sure. But his ability to connect with players, largely one of the biggest reasons I'm not at all worried about Grady is because I know he has Darko, right? It's important because, if this was happening with Nick Nurse, I'd be like, oh, here goes another Malachi Flynn. But I don't see Grady sulking on the bench. I don't see his downtrodden body language that I saw last year. I see him engaged. I see him talking to coaches. When I see Grady in practice, he's engaged. When I see Precious Achua in practice or Christian Koloko in practice, they're engaged, right? They're still learning. They're still figuring it out. Look, at the end of the day, I don't know where this team is going. I hope that they're not heading for, 12th or 11th, because they're currently 12th right now. I don't know where they're going to end up, is what I'm saying. But I do know that long term, the players who trust in him and the players who, buy into his system, maybe those players will be better players in 3 months than they are today. And maybe that's his mandate. That's the goal. The goal isn't who is Grady Dick in November, December, but rather who is Grady Dick in year 3, right? Maybe that's what he's going to be judged on. Maybe the goal isn't, the win-loss record, but rather is Scottie Barnes back to what we thought he would be? Maybe the goal isn't to create a winning offense, but rather to lay the seeds of a winning offense by getting these guys to pass more. And maybe that's going to be really uncomfortable for a bit. I certainly have my issues with Darko Rajakovic as a coach so far. I have my issues with his adjustments, his lineups, his stubbornness to start Dennis. But I cannot with a straight face tell you for sure that he could do different if he wanted to do different. I also cannot tell you for sure that he has some insane blinders on for Dennis. I'm sure he likes the guy. He's talked very favorably about him. But most of this Dennis loves Darko stuff has come from Dennis, not Darko. Anyways, I want to say that I wish the Raptors well in the new year. Maybe they will be one of the teams that do turn it around. There are teams ahead of the Raptors, specifically the Cavaliers and the New York Knicks, that are facing major injuries. Now, the Knicks missing Mitchell Robinson is a huge blow to their defense. The Cavaliers missing Darius Garland is a huge blow to their offense. Missing Evan Mobley is a huge blow to their defense. Tyrese Halliburton has not been super great since the in-season tournament. The Pacers need a trade. Will they make a trade? I don't know. But suddenly you can see that team, after all the rumors that Tyrese Halliburton wants to recruit a star, that team hasn't been the same. So I wonder if right now the Raptors are one trade away from changing their entire season. Because once that shoe drops, I think people will feel a lot easier about it. You know what I mean? Because I heard last year from sources that were inside the locker room that the Raptors had coaches who were openly talking about where they're going to be working next year and pitching themselves for jobs on the road because they all knew they were gone. I heard on a podcast from a person who would know inside the Raptors locker room that there were 8 or 9 guys who were just looking around wondering if they were going to get traded. That element of, I don't think this is a team we're going to finish the year with, hasn't gone away. And it's really hard to coach in a situation where you're coaching a player as if he's your player, but that coach is talking to a player who believes he might be on another team in a week. It's tough. And certainly if you're looking at the life of an NBA coach or the life of an NBA player, this is certainly not a stable life. This is a tough life. Yes, the money is great. They get to do what they do for a living. It's great. But think about it. Think about your life. Think about my life. I have the privilege of knowing where I'm going to live year to year. I can establish roots and relationships. If I have kids, they can be in a comfortable school. Think about, the day-to-day life, the family life of an NBA coach or an NBA player. It's a nightmare. So many of them get divorces. So many of them. Because it's tough. It's tough. And there is a human element to this that must be accounted for. That Pascal Siakam has not known whether he would be a Toronto Raptor the next week for 2 straight years. He must hear the rumors. He must. And no matter how much Masai Ujiri cajoles him and reassures him, that must be true, right? It has to be true. There has to be some element of humanity put into this because we're talking about human beings. And at the end of the day, if Pascal Siakam has checked out on this team defensively and he's just kind of padding his stats and padding his numbers, if Fred VanVleet or Nick Nurse checked out on this team last year, it's largely because they were thinking ahead to their next stop. And in both those cases, they were right. And in Pascal Siakam's case, he'll be right. I try not to judge people too harshly, although I sometimes struggle with it, when they are put in a position that I myself can understand and empathize that I would not do too well in that situation. If you went to work and you knew you were going to get fired the next week, I think your work ethic might change. It takes a very, very special type of person to not allow these extenuating circumstances to alter your behavior. I have watched Kobe Bryant quit on his team midway through a freaking series and refuse to shoot. I've watched LeBron James do the same thing. I've watched Michael Jordan do almost the same thing once too. Some of the greatest players of all time. I've watched Shaq come into year after year after year out of shape as he now gets paid millions of dollars to sit on TV and talk about Zion Williamson being out of shape. Come on. There's a human element to all of this. I think it would help all of us to be a little bit more balanced and nuanced, myself included. Certainly, I'll throw myself into this first and foremost. I'm running a podcast, which can often be very emotionally charged after a loss, and maybe I got too carried away yesterday. Certainly, I could see where I got too carried away, and as much as the frustration is building towards this team and the product on the court, and it's not fun to watch Dennis Schroeder run around with a chicken like his head cut off. At the end of the day, I'm reminded that the chances that this team will finish with this roster as currently constructed at the end of the season are very slim. So let's wait for a trade to happen. Hopefully the trade will happen soon. I'm going to still try to do the live with my boy Leo. Hopefully at some point today. Let me see, just messaged and just check it out. Maybe we can do it. Okay. So he said 4:30 my time or anytime after 9 or 9:30 p.m. Okay. So I think we'll do one in an hour, and hopefully we can get some Sacramento Kings and Raptors trades going. We'll set that up. Thank you all for joining this live. Hopefully it has been an interesting conversation. If not, hopefully it's a little bit repetitive. Nice one saying, Rob, what do you think about a Mitchell trade? It's never been rumored. Maybe they're going that route. Well, it has been rumored, and I don't necessarily know how he fits, but certainly would be a huge, huge talent upgrade. And I kind of like the fit with Scottie. I just wonder if his heart is so set on New York that you would lose him for nothing once again. Yeah. Anyways, I'll let you all know about the next stream. Hopefully it's coming up in the next hour and a half or so. Certainly, it'll be a different subject, and we'll have Leo on, and I still don't know exactly what he wants to pot up about. I have a feeling it's to talk about the NBA in general and the Sacramento Kings, etc., and maybe Raptors trades, and maybe even getting the perspective of a media person on the other coast and seeing how they see Pascal and OG. So it certainly should be a lively discussion. And I got my vocal cords warmed up, even though I still have a bit of a cough from last week. So make sure to hit like and subscribe. And a final reminder, please vote for Scottie for All-Star. Y'all, let's do our job. Let's get this guy voted in. I think it would be a hell of an honor for him to be voted in as a starter. But certainly if he's not voted in as a starter, Mike Malone had some impressive things to say about him after yesterday's games. Vegan Grass saying, you watching the Pistons? Are they playing right now? No, I'm not. Yeah. No, I didn't. But Rage West Promotions, when does voting start? Voting started on the 19th. Today is the 21st. I will remind you, you get to vote once every 24 hours. So if you vote right now, you will have to vote. You will only be able to vote vote right now, and you'll be able to vote again this time tomorrow. The problem with voting later in the day is if you slip by a couple hours, eventually you'll miss a day. So on day one, which was the 19th, I voted at noon, which is a big mistake. I should have voted at midnight. I didn't do that. So I voted at noon. And now today I registered my vote at 3 p.m. So I've already lost 3 hours in the conversion. It's I gotta set an alarm on my phone, like boom, 3 o'clock tomorrow, vote, 3 o'clock next day, vote. Because at some point what's going to happen is you're going to be delayed by 3-4 hours and you're going to miss the midnight mark. So will you be watching them? Of course. I don't know. At this point, I mean, the league is very competitive and their team is not. Pin the link in your Twitter description. Oh, that's a good idea. I should do that. Maybe a campaign with other YouTubers for Scottie. And they can do their own thing, man. To be honest, like I'm not really in the. Maybe what we should do, here's an idea that we could do. We could try to reach out to other fan bases and talk about a vote swap. See, personally, I don't really give a shit who gets voted in the West. I really don't. So, having a vote swap with the OKC Thunder, where we agree that we will vote for Chet and Shea if they vote for Scottie and OG or something like that. I did mention earlier, in yesterday's live and the day before, also, please do not vote for other players in the East front court who have a chance of beating out Scottie. No Tatum, no Giannis, no Embiid, probably no Siakam either. I just no Randall, no big names, guys who have a chance, no Jaylen Browns and stuff like that. The reason I say no Kristaps Porzingis, the reason I say this is because, again, like we've talked about it. Clan Holmes, Sacramento. Yeah, that wouldn't be the worst idea. Let's do that. Let's create a deal with Leo today and Sacramento Kings and say, okay, we'll vote De'Aaron Fox, you vote Scottie Barnes. That type of deal. That would help. You basically double your votes, right? If teams can do this, if we can negotiate, podcasters can negotiate this, that would be great. He talks to the Sacramento Kings faithful. Certainly, he can start pushing Scottie Barnes, and we can start pushing, De'Aaron Fox or Keegan Murray or Domantas Sabonis, one of those three guys. We'll do a 1-for-1 swap, Should I pays? No, you don't have to pay to vote, bro. You can vote for free. You vote on NBA.com. Just go to NBA.com, All-Star Voting. If you go Google NBA All-Star Voting, yeah, we'll definitely do that. Anyways, I will let y'all know about the next live. Peace out for now, and I hope this one was good. If it was good, like it, and if it wasn't, write me a comment and let me know why. All right, peace.